I want to introduce you to a man who I think is going to be very well known as soon as this Royal Commission into child sex abuse becomes up and running after it gets its terms of reference. He's currently a Nationals MP for the seat of Dubbo. He only became a politician at the start of this term in New South Wales. He's only been there for about 18 months. Before that, he was a copper. He joins me now in our Sydney studio. His name is Troy Grant. Troy, good evening.
Good evening, Paul.
Now, Troy, we've spoken a couple of times on the radio. I think it's important to bring this to the television audience now, is that you were a police officer and a very sizable part of your career was investigating sex crimes, and you have first-hand evidence and proof that you have been willing to talk about in Parliament, that you're willing to talk about publicly, that the church was directly involved in covering up an investigation that you were involved in.
That is correct. I was an investigator at the Major Crime Squad based out of Newcastle from 1995 to 1997. I came across a historical brief in relation to Father Vincent Gerard Ryan, who was a priest within the Newcastle Maitland Diocese. Two victims came to see me. I commenced investigations into that. A series of offences in 1975 was what they put to me. I spent considerable time with those victims and took significant evidence as to some horrendous crimes that occurred to those two boys at the time. And that investigation led me to another 4 victims from that 1975 incident. And then media in relation to that then brought forward another victim in between the 80s and 90s. And I then initiated charges against Father Ryan at that point.
What happens once you started that process, when you tried to take it into the next level, when it was time for him to start heading towards a courtroom? What happened?
Well, in my case, the family were very keen to obviously know when police were in a position to charge Father Ryan, and we kept them up to date with that information. One of the mothers, who was a devout Catholic, and most of the families involved in this were very loyal, very devout to the church, was very distressed and sought the comfort of a nun from St Joseph Water in that diocese. She let the nun know that the charges were pending, and the nun then told her superior nun, who then told Monsignor Patrick Cotter at the time, who in the 1975 incidents was the acting bishop of the diocese after the death of Bishop Toohey. He then drove to Taree, where Ryan was stationed, or that's where his parish was at the time of his arrest, and he alerted him to his pending arrest. Father Ryan then went and destroyed an amount of pornographic material prior to police arrival, which didn't ultimately affect the investigation into him. He destroyed that material out of embarrassment for what he thought we would think of him, but rather the overwhelming evidence we found in his possession, and that as a result of a number of search warrants we executed on Catholic premises throughout the diocese, was just startling. This included correspondence between Monsignor Cotter and the Vatican. This included correspondence detailing the planned removal of Father Ryan from Newcastle to Kew in Victoria, and then correspondence throughout 1976 with Monsignor Cotter and his planned return back into the diocese. In that correspondence, what the most disturbing part of it is, and where I think the greatest travesty lays, is that he admits to his knowledge of incidents reported to him in 1975. He admits to knowledge of incidents in 1974 and regrets that he didn't take action at that time in his correspondence to a Franciscan priest who was also a psychiatrist in Victoria. The fact he chose to do nothing and then returned Father Ryan into the diocese ultimately led to so many of the boys being victims when they just didn't need to. And I think that's the greatest tragedy of the tale that I was exposed to.
This, and I'm like anyone else hearing this tale, this is extraordinary, but it seems that as we now move towards this Royal Commission, that this is not going to be an unusual tale that is there. You, when we spoke about this a bit earlier in the day on the radio, also told me about the experience of having to talk to the victims of sexual abuse, an abuse that was covered up by the Catholic Church, and how unsatisfied those people were when effectively the system closes in and there is no chance of a prosecution.
Yeah, that's correct. The travesty was that there was a number of eras or generations of victims that came forward and I actually arrested Ryan on two occasions. On the second occasion, when I took another series of victims to him with significant evidence to support their allegations, he broke down in the interview and he basically confessed all. And he gave to us, which totalled 35 victims that he had preyed upon over a 20-year period. I was 25 at the time, Paul. I wasn't that experienced. To be honest with you, I was quite shocked. And so were my more senior colleagues who accompanied me through the interviews. I then had the grisly task of tracking down a lot of these victims, and over 20 years of offending and some 20 years later, not the easiest job in the world, I tracked down the majority of them. And as I spoke in Parliament about today, one of those tasks was to actually go to the family who had lost their son to suicide and had no understanding as to why they'd lost their son. And I had the most unpleasant task, and something that still troubles me to this day, of telling them why their son had died. What is more distressing is I could tell them that it didn't have to happen. And that's the sort of information that Cardinal Pell has said that I've exaggerated. That's the sort of information that he says hasn't happened, or that I have no right to talk about, or that I've just got it wrong. This is material written documentation I have copies of, and this is the information I am more than prepared to present to any Royal Commission when asked.
You've said publicly before that you believe that George Pell should resign. Do you believe that he should resign now, and if so, why so in relation to this investigation?
Look, further to Cardinal Pell's accusations against me is that he has indicated or accused me of defaming him or linking him to the cover-up of those investigations. I've never done any such thing. What I've done from the outset, beginning in August on the Late Line program, was to challenge him as the leader of the Catholic Church in Australia to do more. I acknowledge, as I did in the Parliament today, that in recent years the Church have been bringing into systems that they've dictated the way that the Church will handle new claims of assault and procedures and support mechanisms that they've now designed and built. That's for another discussion. What they've fundamentally failed to do, and I think is what has alluded to Peter Fox coming out, is they've done nothing about those that still exist within the Catholic Church who were central to the conspiracies, central to the decision-making to move, in my instance, Father Ryan, from Newcastle to Victoria in 1975. They have not yet been held to account for returning him and setting him to prey upon a large number of further victims. And to me, that is unacceptable. And I've challenged him to take a greater leadership role to tackle those issues and to bring the missing piece of justice these victims are after, and as those who should be held to account for those actions in 1975 should be led by the leader of this church to do exactly that.
Troy, it's nice to be able to meet you on the national stage. I want as many people to be able to hear from you as possible. No doubt we'll talk a lot more between now and when the commission is set up, and then we look forward to your involvement in it when it is up and running. Good on you, and good on you for being a Polly who doesn't want to do it in Coward's Castle. You're willing to do it on TV.
Welcome, Paul.